Hello everybody, it's the Alco Diesel guy with another review for you. In this case, it's the Bowser rs-3. I have been waiting for this engine for ages, as in 6 years ago, when they were finally announced and put into production by Bowser. They had been promised, and finally, after the events of 2020 finally beginning to wear off and things going in a different direction, we finally got in production back on track, and these things have finally been debuted. This particular unit is a Spokane, Seattle, and Portland unit. Pardon me, Spokane, Portland, and Seattle unit, equipped with the beacon, which is one of the reasons why I ordered it. Let's get right to it and unbox the unit itself. I would also like to take this opportunity to point out that this is a model, not a toy. It is made for, as very clearly described by the box, 14 years and up. That is to say, no one under 14 years of age should be handling this particular model, as it is a model and not a toy. It is a model. There are a lot of small parts that kids can choke on, so please note this when you view this video, and please view this accordingly. Again, it has this little plastic sheen over it. I've ordered a few of these units, a few of them in this paint scheme, and one or two in a few other paint schemes. A few of them didn't get shipped. I kind of canceled a few, I should say, and then changed the order around. Moving the top of the box, we can see the engine is right in here. Again, secured in the way Atlas does its models right now. It's got this sort of plastic bar going across the box itself with two foam pads holding it in place. So very, very solid. This clearly is not going anywhere. So to get this out, let's see how we do this now. I believe this just slides right out. There it goes. Really packed tight. So this thing did not move around unnecessarily. Apparently someone really did their homework on making sure this thing was packed tightly as well. I just put this up on its stand here for a second. Before I put the box aside, let's just quickly look inside and see what we get. It's always some kind of stuff you get with these. You could sort of call it swag, but not really. And what we have here is a comprehensive instruction for factory lubrication. There's no exploded parts diagram, at least not here. It looks like that might be down here. Here are the instructions to adjust the horns and the other such packages. Again, this is the Dcc&sound equipped version of this unit, so it has all these sounds in it. I'll probably mess around with this a little bit later. This is what I was looking for. We have some more detail parts in here. These, what are these here? There's some kind of part. I think these are the bearings for the wheels. Bearing caps for the wheels or something. I have to look this up to see exactly what these are specifically. And we also have our instruction manual, which is tucked in right there. Kind of squashed in there, if you will. Lube the axles. Again, this is a different model that I'm familiar with. Oh, I see. Lube projectors with hinges pickup. Oh, I see. So this has similar pickups, it looks like, to what the Atlas locomotives have, which is that little sort of contact assembly that sits on top of the axle points and picks up power from those locations. One of the better ways of doing things, I believe. Motor shafts. Oh, so it does show you how to lubricate everything. That's nice. So apparently the lubrication points are right there, like most of these particular units. So nice that they do that. There's no comprehensive parts diagram, although you do sort of see the internals of this locomotive. I should also note that as of this time, these do not have a Keep Alive available out of the factory, nor do I even think there's even any kind of Keep Alive package available to install on these units. Now, if we're going to discuss rs-3s, we have to talk about the Atlas Kato, and later just Atlas Classic, and eventually just Atlas rs-3s. These particular models are legendary for their drive system developed by Kato. This is an interesting situation in which, in the 80s, producing these locomotives became cheaper in Japan because of the exchange rate being very favorable. And so Kato got a contract from Atlas to produce a realistic rs-3, which no one had been able to do for that time because of massive flywheels that were usually shared upon several different models from the current model railroad manufacturers of the time. Anyway, Kato relished the task. They promptly developed a custom drive system that would allow them to get the proportions of the shell just right, which is tricky, because if you look at how low this shell is, it is very hard to fit all that in here. Kato managed to pull it off. They got a drive system together that is legendary in terms of its reliability. They also managed to put a lot of details in it. Now, admittedly, the earlier versions of this, and check out my RS11 review video that I did on those for more information on this, would have had these sort of molded in plastic railings. Here they're separately applied the grab irons, I should say, they're separately applied. Same thing with the brake wheel, etc. So in a way, it really did excel for the time. That is, again, the problem was for that time. Things have changed since then, and one of the annoying flaws this engine did carry over right into the current models, and still does carry over, I should say, is the fact that all the details, despite whatever road name you have, are exactly the same. This is despite the fact that many different railways opted for different options. For example, here we have a horn facing in either direction. This is not common among many of these engines, and many would say this is incorrect, and for the most part, you'd be right. The original prototype was set up like this. Many railroads didn't opt for this because this is a higher maintenance issue because you have two different air feeds that have to be taken care of. The more common solution was to have a single pod assembly placed in here, and that would in turn allow the horns to be put in one single location with horns facing in either direction, which would be easier to replace and easier to maintain. To a certain extent, this makes it hard to point fingers at Bachmann for doing this because they're guilty of the same thing, essentially putting one horn on the long hood. Some might call that an RS2, and it kind of looks like it too if you look carefully at the unit. It looks as if the company may have confused the two models together on its new sort of sound value edition engines, DCC equipped editions for those models. But again, the detailing of those has been further cheapened. You'll note that this engine on the Atlas, for example, has the diamond plating, whereas on the Bachmann rs-3, again, you don't even get that. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing out of its packaged sort of security plastic device thing. Going to go now and see how we get it out. Looks like we have two screws to remove on the bottom here. Let me go grab a Phillips head. Okay, I'm going to employ this sort of foam storage thing I used for one of my one of my graphics cards came in to take this thing out. Going to just make it sit down flat in here. There we go. That'll work pretty well. So now I'm going to go ahead now and remove these two screws with my Phillips head screwdriver. Parts installed, you don't have to mess with them. Never will be good at installing those. I always break them when I try to put detail parts in, so I appreciate this method. Okay, and that does it. It is now out. Put my retaining clip in there. Get these two screws out of here and put this right back on the table. There we are. Let's go take a good look at her and see what we have here. So start with. You see this has a very, very, very well detailed setup here. Every little detail part is right where it should be. As I said before, for the most part, the models of this type of locomotive in the past always lacked details in one way or the other, usually using one sort of model to base all the different road names on, lacking the sort of road-specific details. Here, that is not the case, I'm proud to report. Let me zoom in a little bit more and do this more justice. As you can see here, to start with, on the front, we have the specific Seattle, Spokane, and Portland. Spokane, Portland, and Seattle. Pardon me, I can't speak right today. Number boards with the marker lights on the side, although these do not function as far as I know. We also have the headlight, the brake wheel, all in the proper locations. I really like how these things reflect. Even though they're not lit, they do have this sort of diamond inside, so they will reflect light. Looks really sharp. On top, we have an antenna, which was common for this particular model that the SP&S had. We also have the beacon light on the top here, which does actually function. That's one of the reasons why I bought this model. I am a sucker for beacons. I love extra flashing light details. And we again have, as I mentioned before with an Atlas rs-3, an actual pod for the horns. This is actually a common utilization where the horns are in both directions mounted on a little pod, although I think these are all in the same direction here. Again, very few had it where there was one horn on the front and one horn on the back. There's no steam generator stack because this version didn't have it. We also have the proper smokestack with the little stack extension part here, which I believe is for a spark arrestor. And we have the cooling fan at the very front of the long hood. And again, the number boards at the very front of the locomotive with separately applied grab irons, as well as the nice sort of details here, the little footbridge to get between the engines. We then have a coupler with a spring. It's also a Katy coupler type coupler, which I appreciate. None of this nonsense with those cheap ones. We have these horns, which, pardon me, not the horns, the air hoses, which are more or less look like a separately applied part, but essentially could have been like most of these applied to or molded right into the plastic because you can't actually move them without breaking them. We also have an uncoupling rod, which again is molded in place, so don't try to move this, it will break. And again, I should note on the back, which I neglected to mention before, in addition to the brake wheel and everything else, we again have the grab irons to climb to the top of this short hood. The paint, in general, is very bright and vibrant. Oh, another little detail I don't want to forget to mention. This is the actual exhaust for the radiator. A lot of companies forget to put this in. But when the engine's working hard, you'll note steam comes up from the side. That's actually supposed to happen. This is the exhaust for the actual water-cooled cooling system for the engine itself. The vents are very nicely etched and detailed into the plastic. I love how this looks. The railings are plastic, and they seem a bit on the flimsy side, I will say. At first touch, hopefully they won't break. Hopefully not. That's one of my pet peeves, to have those fail on me. I'm not sure anyone actually enjoys that, to put it mildly, but for me, that's really a sticking point. If they fail, I tend to not be a happy camper. Another nice little detail installed in this particular model is the bay window, which is correct for this particular locomotive in real life. One of the few areas this locomotive seems to fall on its face is the actual cab detailing itself. There's almost nothing in there except some white panels, which do a rough job of representing the control stand and gauges, but that's basically it. Again, there is no painting or any other kind of detailing in the cab whatsoever, except for a plain white piece of plastic representing these two items. Turning the unit upside down, as I put some plastic down again, the underbody detailing is somewhat limited, but there isn't much to see here. As we can see, again, the pickup system is very similar to that of the Atlas locomotives. These little copper sort of outside wheel pickups are mounted on the actual axle tips of the wheels themselves. This is a very unique way of doing things because it keeps the dirt away from the wheels, because these wheels tend to get charged, and as a result, all the grit and grime goes on top of the wheels themselves, and they get dirty very quickly. I also note these wheels will probably need to get cleaned before I use them because there is a layer of dirt on them, but that's typical for manufacturing processes of late. It does look like this was tested, as there are a few scratches on the wheels, telling me that this has been run once or twice, but just a little bit, probably to quality test it, which is fine. There are some nice little underbody effects right over here. We have an extra radiator that was installed here, an extra oil cooler or water cooler put on the bottom. Nice little touch there by Bowser. We have here the air horn hookups right here in the front. I should mention I didn't see that before. Overall, just a very nicely detailed model. Now, I haven't been able to look at the drive system. I won't be doing it on this particular model because I don't need to disassemble it. I will probably get my DCC ready one out and actually pull that apart, because I'm going to have to put a decoder in that one. And most likely, it looks like I'm going to have to just buy a decoder off the shelf from Sound, because there's no one else I can turn to that will actually work with these things. I believe these are Sound 4.0s, pardon me, 5.0s. I don't think they'd use the 4.0 anymore. The thing is, this is where delayed manufacturing can fall into place here. I don't think the 4.0s are in manufacturing anymore, but the 5.0s weren't available when this was announced. It was a 4.0. So it'd be interesting to know if this is actually a 5.0 or a 4.0. Oh yeah, here it is. It is in fact the 5.0 or Sound 5 right here. Sound 5 instruction manual. So first impressions, I'm pretty impressed. That's saying quite a bit. Hopefully this engine will run as good as it looks. The one thing against this unit, I can tell without even so much as testing it, is that it does not have Keep Alive. And that's going to be against it, because I like to have my engines with Keep Alive as per my weird yards and weird power situations I have on the layout. People criticize me for this, but it's just how it's set up. Hopefully at one point TCS will come up with a board I can drop the decoder on top of, or I can put a whole new decoder in. But for the time being, this is going to remain an ESU-equipped locomotive. So anyway, enough jabbering. Let's get her onto the track and see how she works. Okay, now onto the layout. As you see, I have my Spokane, Portland, and Seattle Bowser rs-3 now in place in the yard. I'm going to go give her a test run. Not expecting too many shocks on this, because this engine essentially has the standard sound package. Not a bad thing either necessarily, but at the same time, I don't expect to get anything too original on it. Let me just make sure I got you well balanced here. It looks like I have you pretty well set up here. There we go. Just have to tweak my tripod a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead now and give her a whirl and see how she runs. Let's go fire her up. It's going to be, again, function H. Oh, they got rid of the bell, the oil pressure bell thing. Let's do the shutdown procedure again, since I have it right in front. Now, I gotta say, that is nice and loud as it goes through the shutdown procedure. What I want to make clear is that's the engine raw. I have it programmed to address 3. I haven't done anything. In sharp contrast to the repeater where I could just barely hear it, this thing makes itself known. So let's fire that up again and see if I get the bell effect this time. Nope. Oop, pardon me, folks. So I'll shut that off again. So it appears they changed the startup sequence and shut down the sequence. This is Loc-Sound 5, as I found out when I installed it. Pardon me, when I pulled it out of the box. Pardon me. This is a Loc-Sound 5 equipped locomotive, and this is very clearly just the stock sound effects off the shelf from ESU. Although I have noticed that there's a Longwood forward sound effect. I wonder if that has something to do with it as well. So anyway, let's go through the features of the engine in general. First, we have the bell. Let's see what the stock bell sounds like. That's number 1. A little bit quicker, I like that effect. Let's see what the horn sounds like. So that's unusual. Ignore that sound, that's actually from a Soundtrax equipped engine sitting in my engine house over here. Let's go number 3 here, that is the coupler clank. Four does what? What is 4? I think that's usually a dynamic brake signal, and as you see, it doesn't do anything. And that makes sense because this engine, I don't believe, had dynamic brakes from the factory. Again, that was something new back in the 50s, although it would catch on pretty quick. Let's go ahead and push 5 and see what that does. I'm looking also for the... Oh, there it is. That's actually exactly what I was going to say. That engages, as we look at the top now, the beacon, which is a nice little feature in this locomotive. I like beacons. I love beacons, correction. So that's a nice feature. It's one of the reasons, admittedly, that I bought this engine, because I'm just such a sucker for these things. Let's disable that one, turn that off again, and go to 6. Let's see what that does. Nothing. And the marker lights on the side of the engines inside of this engine do not actually light up. They are like crystals, some kind of crystal filament, or sort of faux crystal. It gives the illusion that they're lit, but that's about all it does. It's a nice touch, but still. Let's see what 7 does. Nothing. 8 is the startup sequence. 9 does what? 9 does nothing. Very sort of sparse at that point. Again, this engine's development started way back with Loc-Sound 4.0, so it might be that no one thought of those features because they weren't going to be available. Function 12, anything? Nope, nothing on that. So yeah, pretty bare bones in terms of functionality, at least from what I can tell. Although again, that's kind of matching what this engine is, because again, this is an early diesel locomotive. There weren't as many features available because they simply hadn't been invented yet, so it's not so hardcore. So anyway, let's start her up again. I'll put the headlights on. The headlights don't seem to be working. That's interesting. Very interesting. Oh, there we go. Now they work. That's strange. I've had that happen sometimes. Let's go give her a little run. I have cars. As you can see, I've hooked this up to a string of cars. My MOV train, which I've had in my yard. I figure I might as well use this to take it apart since it happens to be sitting in front of me. I'm not expecting the switching performance to be great on this because, again, the locomotive is not equipped with Keep Alive from the factory. That's a bit of an oversight. It's going to become something, in my opinion, that's going to be required in the future, as all model locomotive manufacturing companies are sort of including one variant of that or another in their locomotives, and or using a decoder company that has a variant of this available. Loc-Sound hasn't come out with one as of yet, but there is a way of modifying it and putting a Keep Alive system in there. I'm hoping that TCS will come out with a Keep Alive conversion kit for this model. I have one that is DCC ready, so I'd love to do that if they do ever come out with it. Well, anywho, let's give this thing a run. Throttle her up a little bit. Pull forward this time. I'm going to pull her out of the yard so I can get into the yard and actually get into my switching area. Look at that. Beautiful model. It's just too bad it doesn't have the Keep Alive. That really kind of spoils it. But let's see how she does in switching. I'm going to carefully come out of here. Going to go all the way clear until my last car clears the string here, and then back into it again. Let's get the beacon on. There it is. Again, function 5 activates the beacon. And I think actually probably there's one feature I forgot to mention. I think F11 dims the lights. It is cool that that beacon though is functional. That's a nice little touch they did to this engine. So that's now back all the way out. So now let's go and throw some switches here. Again, I manually switched this yard in terms of throwing the switches. Let me set it up. And I believe if I'm correct or not, this should be set up to take the train in. Let me go through. Pardon me, folks. I'm just going to throw one last switch there to get it in, and that should be good to go. Let us go ahead now and reverse it. Okay, let's now back her in. The wrong engine selected. There we go. The air let off effect is also gone. That's not so nice. That's not such a nice alteration or deletion or whatever you want to call it. Creeping into my yard. I'm not going to count obviously the performance of these cars. As you see, it's a mixed bag of an old model power metal train car and a few others. If one of those derails, I'm not going to go nuts because I don't expect things from these cars. They're just something I kind of threw together for fun one day with this sort of set of cars I have together here. I'm more interested in seeing how the locomotive is going to deal with this. Zoom out a bit there. Oops. Have to uncouple these now and back them out. Okay, that's as far as they can go. So far, so good. I haven't gotten into any of the switch points yet, so it's not surprising it didn't cut out as of yet right now in terms of power, in terms of its ability to stay running. Let me now go and unhook one of these cars here. Or I got to do a manual uncouple here. Away we go. So far, so good with the switching. I think I'll leave these attached to it for the time being, but I will back them into another siding just to see how this thing handles the switches. Again, a well-wired locomotive will actually avoid stalling out in these points, so let's see if that actually works here. If it's I should say a good pickup system equipped locomotive won't stall out on these points, so we'll see about that. Love that beacon on top there. So let's see if the pickup system can keep this thing from stalling out. Put on the uncoupling thing right there. There we go. Just put on the uncoupling magnet thingy. And if you look at that, it hasn't cut out any time. It just keeps going. And mind you, again, these are non-powered frogs, so that's pretty darn good. That's a non-insular frog Pico switch I'm on right now, which is a three-way switch going into another non-powered frog switch, and it hasn't stalled or cut out, which is impressive. It's not impressive as my coupler thing there. I'm just going to leave that car in there, I think. So I think what I'm going to do now is actually grab the rest of the train now that I got that one car unhooked and put it on here. Or maybe I'll just run these. I have to think about it. Yeah, let me give this train a run around the track and clean things up a bit, because I haven't really cleaned this main line too much. Let's go now and stop here, and let's get into... Yeah, let me actually just take these cars out for a spin like this. Or yeah, you know what, let me add some cars. I'm really in a funny mood today. Let's grab those other cars again. Try her one more time, reverse. Then it's not cutting out any of the switches, it's just working, which is pretty impressive considering there's no keep alive on this thing. Okay, so I've hooked up to what's left on that. Let's go ahead and pull this train out and get it on the main line. I'm caught on something again. Yep, uncoupling thing again. Uncoupling magnets are pretty much useless for uncoupling and anything else. I should say useless for everything, including uncoupling, because they don't even do that right in my experience. That's why I really don't use them anymore. Let's get out of here, and as soon as I'm clear of that switch, I'm going to close it. Let's go up to a better speed, get the bell off, and start to accelerate a little bit more here, up to 50 steps. Survey the Magnificent, there she goes. Very impressive. So far, at least. So I'll let this break in for a little bit, and then I'm going to try something else with it. You notice the motor makes an extensive amount of whining or groaning. I don't know how well that's showing up in the video or being picked up by the camera. Okay, so I've been running this around the track for a bit now. It runs really nicely. This rs-3 here. I think I'm ready now to try something more adventurous. I'm going to take her up. As you see, I've already moved into the second track. I'm going to take her up my mountain now. Let's get a little bit more speed on this first. First, I got to get her on the third track. And also, in case anyone hasn't noticed, I do have another engine joining the operating session. That is the famous PA, which is my channel's mascot. The restored Alco PA I've been running with the low sound decoder and everything. Running in this case it's two New York Central coaches because that's what I happened to have on the layout at the time. Anyway, let's get going here. I'm going to go through my switches here and manually transition this engine over. One. And let's now go ahead and transfer onto the third track so I can take the mountain. Looks like my PA is going to interfere with the shot a bit here. Of course, that engine always loves the spotlight. Doesn't bother it too much, though. There it goes. Onto the third track. So there we are. No problem with the locomotive. I wouldn't be surprised if the car is giving me an issue, but no, they're fine too. That's good. That's very good, but that's great. Okay, let me reverse it and now get back through here. Those switches I do have electrified, but just easier, and I actually enjoy throwing them manually, so I've just been doing that lately. So let's now reverse and go up the mountain. Make sure that switch is open. Okay, it's back through here. Can't see the train much around here because of the way that track is set up. Again, this was not designed with filming in mind when I built this railroad, to put it mildly. Right there, you'll see the caboose start to come out, and we'll now back her onto the main line and head up the mountain. Give her a little bit more power. One note on this next shot, no, you're not seeing things. I did remove that first tank car. The reason being, it's a track cleaning car and it was bottoming out and causing issues getting the train up the hill. Obviously, I shortened the train, but mind you, that car in the middle is die-cast with the bulldozers on it, so I think that's only fair. Little wheel slippage, not much. All the way up to the top right there. Whoa. I have the points aligned this time, so I just have to keep going. I'll go until I come to the end of the siding. Nice brake effect. No let-off effect when I get off the brakes, though. Let's go back down the line again. Okay, so that went pretty well. Seems to handle the switches very nicely, no derailing, no issues. Heck of a lot better than Rapidos, of which I sent those 3 New Havens back to Rapido because they wouldn't even make it around the layout itself or make a lap. This is doing all of that and more. So overall, yeah, I'm very happy with that. May I actually run it in the intended direction. And clear the traffic there. Give it a few laps around the third track. Then I guess I'll take it into the yard over here at Midville and see how it handles the tight turns there. I have to say, this thing makes a lot of racket, though, when it runs. The motor in general is what I mean, not the sound effects. It really groans and growls its way down. I don't know how well this is coming out of the film. Okay, just cleaning my yard up and getting it ready for the train to actually enter it. I got to push this car this Toys R Us box car, which is one of my more recently completed projects, into its proper storage location. Make sure it's uncoupled before it enters this area. See it coming right by there. A little bit too fast, 7 for the brake. That was a little bit harder than I wanted to hit it. I should pull this one a little bit further ahead because I just realized it's going to have to go right next to it. And here comes the rs-3. Hard to see it now because it's right underneath the main trestle right there, but there she is backing in. And let's now set this up for a different track. Slow the train's progress down a bit so I'm ready here. Let's see how I what am I doing now? Okay, gotta keep moving in there. Yeah, I do miss the throttling up and down of the decoder like the old Sound 4.0s did. You can do it with drive hole, but it's a real pain because you have to do it yourself. I'd rather be surprised by it. And here, as always, are the infamous 16-inch curves around the back of my engine house. Let's keep going here, turning into the siding. Ease off on the power a little bit here. I feel like it's going to come off the track. It's hanging there right now. Ooh, it looks like I'm breaking into the railings a little bit here. It's a little bit too close to the engine when I backed in. And right there. And as you can see, the locomotive and indeed the entire train made it without any issues whatsoever. Impressive. Okay, let's get the power's dropped off. Let's reverse directions now. We'll go forward and pull out. Again, it made it through the round. That's a tight 15-inch trim without an issue. I'm actually going a little bit faster than that mic right here, but I'm just going to let it run. No issues at all through the 16-inch turn. Didn't even hesitate on any of the switches, which is incredible. Yeah, very impressive in general with this locomotive. Very impressed with this locomotive, I should say. So I found myself in an impromptu crawl test on this engine. Turn the bell off here because it gets kind of annoying after a while. There we go. As you can see, it crawls very well. Right now I went down to step 3. And looking closely at the front here, you can really appreciate all those details. Look at that look at the silver painting on the ends of those cables there. That's a nice little touch, especially the brake line right there. And the MU cables as well. They all look very nicely done. Now on speed step 1. Nice and smooth and slow chrome. The cab is detailed inside, I should mention, something I didn't go over last time very much. A very nice scroll, very, very nice and slow. And yes, I did get to taking apart the DCC Ready version to put a decoder in it, and while I was able to install a decoder, I didn't have an appropriate speaker in stock. I have ordered the official Bowser speaker to finish this job. To get into it is pretty simple, as you see me doing here. You just remove the 2 screws that hold the couplers in place. They slide out of their pockets, and then the entire chassis can be separated from the body by simply lifting up on the actual body shell itself. Under the hood, we have the usual Bowser circuit board, in this case equipped with a dummy plug, as again, this is the DCC Ready version, and again, no speaker installed. So if one is going to install a decoder on this unit, you're going to have to find a compatible speaker. I, in the end, wound up having to resort to buying the Bowser speaker. The motor itself doesn't appear to be anything special. It's a smaller size motor, which tells me it may have been pared down, although I have no way of proving this. It does, as I note, make a lot of droning noises as the locomotive moves along. This may also have something else to do with the drivetrain. Whatever the case, it seems to get the job done. And it is apparently, according to my sources, a 5-polar. Bowser has definitely created one heck of a locomotive here in terms of its detailing. About the only area I found lacking was the cab itself. Other than that, nice little touches such as the bay window, the beacon, the marker lights, and the very specific road type number boards really set this locomotive apart as something special. It also held the rails beautifully. I didn't suffer any derailment issues testing this locomotive, even through my tight Midville yard 16-inch turns out by the engine house. It did everything I asked of it and basically was asking for more. Even in the rough switching areas where it had a chance to stall, it didn't, which I think is down to the fact that Bowser did a good job with the electric system on it as well as the pickups. About the only thing I have against this locomotive is somewhat rough running due to a seemingly cheapened motor and a roughly manufactured drivetrain, although it might just be on this particular model. I haven't been able to test the other as yet, as I'm still waiting for the speaker to finish that project, and the fact that the cab detailing is severely lacking. In short, this locomotive is a definite buy if you can find it. Just be forewarned, you're going to have to pay for it, as in $299 for Dcc&sound equipped. Although you can get that down to about $250 or $239 if you go to Train World, where I've seen them for. And you better hurry, as they're starting to sell out. This particular model in SP&S paint with the beacon and Dcc&sound seems to have largely sold out, although there are still a few of them hanging around eBay. And that's going to do it for this review. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you liked it, thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. Please subscribe, as it'll help me greatly. And as always, keep the metal side down.